Good morning, everybody, and welcome to UKRI's webinar on sustainable buildings. This is the third webinar in the Net Zero series. The next is on the 20th of July on sustainable industry, and we hope you can join us for that too. My name is Coonick, and I am an innovation lead for the Transforming Construction Challenge. Today, we have a great lineup of speakers to talk through the length and breadth of sustainable buildings, from material scale all the way up to buildings as part of a wider net zero system. There is an opportunity to ask questions at the end of presentations, so feel free to submit a question at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Please do not post questions in the chat box. It's an absolute honour for me to introduce Yewande Akinola, an engineer, innovator and inspiration to many. She has worked in design, construction and manufacturing of buildings and systems across the world. She is named as IET's Young Woman Engineer of the Year and received the Exceptional Achiever Award from the Association for BAME Engineers and ACE. Last year, she was awarded an MBE for services to engineering, innovation and diversity to STEM. And this year, she has become a visiting professor at the University of Westminster and appointed as Innovate UK's Ambassador for Clean Growth and Infrastructure. Over to you, Yewande.
Thank you very, very much, Christine. It's a huge pleasure to be here this morning or afternoon or evening to people who are joining us from different parts of the world. I am Yewande Akinola, and it's a pleasure again to be the chair of this webinar series. I'm really excited for today because I think we're going to delve into a discussion that a lot of people are having, and it's wonderful to have you joining us as well, because what it means is you recognize yourself as an instrument for helping us achieve the targets that we have set ourselves as a nation, as a people, as people who are committed to the future of our planet and the well-being of our planet. The interesting thing about the net zero conversation is that it sits right in the middle of lots of different conversations around well-being, around ensuring the sustainability of our futures, around business efficiency as well, and really cuts across different aspects of industry, different businesses, and really right across the world. It's a global conversation. In the UK, the buildings account for around 20% of emissions. And last year, the government published its 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, setting out a path to net zero by 2050. Now, moving towards net zero means significant step changes in the way we provide buildings. And I say provide buildings because we know that there is a shortfall. We know that we need to change the way we design and construct our buildings. And this step change includes maintaining how we maintain and how we power our buildings and infrastructure. Now, energy conversations are again right at the heart of it. There's a lot of talk around clean energy. And whilst we think of clean energy as the big energy suppliers, like, we try to work out if it's going to be, green through wind or green through solar. Buildings also as a recipient, as a consumer of that clean energy, also sit right at the heart of that conversation. Now, to this end, the Transforming Construction Challenge has been making changes to support industry to ensure that we shift away from a system that delivers the cheapest outcome to one that maximizes the value to society. We've got some big players in the construction industry. And for somebody who has worked in the construction industry as well as in the design consultancy world, I understand the challenges that everyday operations need to evolve through to be able to help us get to where we need to get to in 2050. Now, the challenges are there. How do we evolve our business models? How do we change the way we deliver buildings on site? How do we skill up people to be able to ensure that there's that mind shift, there's that interest in new ways of doing things? Our profit margins are another conversation, because we don't see great profit margins in the construction industry. But with this additional task of rethinking how we actually deliver our buildings, how do we marry the business, I guess, the business reason, the business, reasoning with the sustainable goals, with the environmental goals? And how do we take ourselves from a place where we are working with old, pretty much ancient ways of doing things, to a place where we actually capture all the exciting work that's coming out of, the construction tech industry, all the exciting innovation that's coming out from designing for manufacture and assembly. And also the fact that our clients are possibly starting to ask for different ways of their buildings being delivered as well. And where they're not, how do we ensure that we are inspiring them to ask for sustainable buildings and ensuring that they're happy to go on the journey to be able to get to those buildings that our planet and society absolutely need. I'm very grateful for the work that's currently happening. And really, this is not all doom and gloom for somebody who is, a few years into her career as an engineer in the construction industry. I really regard this as a very exciting time, with government, society, industry really wanting to work hand in hand to be able to achieve something truly transformational. Transformational is not the word that is really associated with the construction industry. And so for us to be able to see innovation sitting sitting alongside transformation in the construction industry is very, very, very exciting for me. And there's some good stories, I guess, proof and data, and to a certain extent, emerging metrics coming out of the good work that is happening. Some success stories include the fact that the Construction Innovation Hub have developed a value toolkit in partnership with over 200 experts from across government and industry. And this will change the way the construction industry, thinks about measuring value and driving better societal and environmental and economic outcomes. And the fact that nearly 200 organizations have signed up to this is a pretty big statement. The advanced industrialized methods for the construction of homes has also been set up to tackle the UK housing crisis by building new homes faster, by looking at cost-effective masonry methods. Landsec, one of the leading real estate companies, has also committed to delivering the UK's first net zero building using a platform which is based on designing for manufacture and assembly. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. And today we are joined by the people who are right at the helm of bringing this change, the people whose job it is day in, day out, to really to bring effective progress, effective change, tangible progress. And hearing from them will give us practical tools to then take into our businesses, to be able to change our delivery models, evolve our delivery models, to be able to look at our business models as well and completely align them to a net zero plan. It's a huge pleasure to be joined by Peter, who is connected in. Peter, have I got you?
Yes, Yewande, you have, yeah.
Fantastic, great. I'm just going to make sure I can see you 1 second. Brilliant. And we're going to be joined as well by Chris, who's introduced us, for ensuring that this is going very smoothly. We're going to be joined by Stuart as well. We're going to be joined by Ian as well. And we've got 2 Ians with us today, and we're also going to be joined by Ron as well. I'm going to start off with Peter, and Peter is the technical lead at Mace Tech. He has worked for Mace for 9 years now, and was the technical director for 15 years at one of the largest specialist concrete trade contractors. He specializes in offsite manufacturing and low carbon construction, and is the president of the Concrete Society, was the president of the Society in 2005, and remains the only contractor to have held this position. Thank you so much, Peter Goring, for joining us. The floor is yours.
Yewande, thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to have a quick spin through really what, addressing some of the issues that Yewande raised in her introduction about how can we change delivery on site and take what is an old established industry and move it forward into the digital and low carbon age. So if I have a quick spin through some things we're doing right now, if we go to the next slide, please, Becky. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually, we have an agenda rather than DFMA, design for manufacturing and assembly. We tend to refer to as construction to production. We're trying to remove our construction site, so off-site, and make it on-site just a production model. So effectively, we're assembling things together from a kit of parts. And the whole premise behind this is making sure we've got a full digital model that maps up everything that we want to do on site, and we have that together. So we have a series of components. Every project is a multi-user prototype delivered by subcontractors. So what we're trying to do is harmonize the design, make the components we put together more rational, so everyone recognizes them. And we refer to it as a methodology, not a system. So we're not reinventing things. We're actually taking the existing construction techniques, we're just doing them smarter, mapped up with the digital model and combined with the design. So this is an example of what we're doing currently on site. And say it ranges from the concrete, we're doing the facades off site, we're then delivering the structure and the envelope together, and we're combining services and structure, and actually putting some of the services into the building before we get to site. It's often the services guys always complain about the construction guys, that they never have it ready for them, and when they do, it's in the wrong place. The idea behind this is all coordinated through design into manufacture to get it to site. So on the next slide, I just want to run through this, how we're doing it. We're actually not having a factory for this. We're actually piggybacking on other people's factories. So many people have invested in some fantastic facilities and spent millions of pounds on it. Our approach is slightly different. We're trying to set up hubs and networks across the country where we use our existing supply chain and work with them to develop. So what you see here is a precast yard in Norfolk. The precaster owns the yard. They manufacture our materials for us. They put them at the back of the site, as you see there underneath the rail. We've actually invested in the crane, so small investment, and we take the units from what we call our supermarket, we bring them forward into a little assembly area, and what you can see there working from back to front is we then we bring the precast forward, we put the facade on it, and then we ship it to site. And if we, on the next slide, it shows you why we're doing this. So on the project we just completed, you see on the right-hand side there, 2 towers, a 30-story and a 26-story tower. And effectively, we built them 18 weeks quicker. Our practical completion date is the 10th of January, and we're expected to hand over to the client on the 30th of November, fully completed. We have a target date a little bit quicker than that to give us an 18-week benefit. Our productivity on site is outstanding. It's traditionally, you would expect it to be around about £60 per man hour. That's gross value added. We've actually been achieving up to 170 on site. And the main reason for that is the amount of resources we've reduced. On the picture on the right-hand side, you see a tail building, 10-storey. That was built traditionally, and the tower is on the sort of the main section. We actually had 52 in our team building the tower, as compared to 120 on the traditional frame. So you can see how it's removing the resource, it's removing the demand in the area, it's taking the amount of welfare facilities we need to minimise, and effectively it's taking a lot of the waste off site. So what we've seen so far is it reduces our waste by 75%, and we always anticipated the reduction in HGV vehicles. What we didn't anticipate though is the amount of LCVs coming to site has almost dropped off completely. It's gone at the time for the plant guy arriving with a little disc cutter grinders and the bag of spacer blocks that got forgotten. These things are not happening on site. They're not needed on site because the components are being coordinated and brought to site in one way. Now, the one thing we haven't really addressed here is the embodied energy, but we have managed to do a slight reduction, 15% reduction through the concrete mix design. So what we've found as we've been delivering these sort of projects over the last 4 to 5 years is that the key to it has been off-site manufacture. But the current demand is moving towards a low carbon environment, and that's certainly taken a lot of an increase in the last 2 to 3 years. In the last year. So on the next slide, I want to look at what we're doing and how we're developing that, and how can we look at the addressing the embodied carbon through construction. So it's a bit of a busy slide. I apologise for that, but effectively, where can we influence? As Mace in 2020, we have achieved net zero on our activities. Now, net zero on our activities is the operations on site. So it's the way the tower cranes work, the way the construction site is run. We don't allow diesel generators on our sites anymore. Everything is electrically powered. And we've managed to cut down from 26,000 tonnes of carbon that we had as a business in 2019, reduced it to just under 13,000 last year. We've offset the rest, and we're working hard to try and get to the point where we're minimum carbon on site. Through our clients, what we call our clients' carbon, so the client's designs, there's about 150,000 tonnes of carbon. Now, we've set targets to say we want to reduce that 10% year on year. And we can do that by looking at the design in different stages. Now, the more early we get involved, the more we can influence. And the more we can look at our processes, the more we can influence it as well. So when you look at the little graph on the bottom right corner, it shows that 50% is in the superstructure, 20% in the substructure. And so if we can target these low-hanging fruits, these material aspects, then that's where we can really start to have an impact on how we do things. So on the next slide, I just want to show what we're doing with materiality alone. And so in the concrete, if we can address the substructure is essentially just concrete with reinforcement. Now, if we have a normal cement in the concrete, it makes up 80% of all the CO2 in the ground. Now, given that 50% of the substructure 50% of the embodied carbon of the building is in the substructure, and the majority of that's going to be in concrete. If we can reduce the cement content straight away, where it's actually in a concrete terms, I can talk about concrete for hours and I won't do that, is we can actually take the cement out of the concrete. The load cycle means that it's less critical on the turnaround time, and therefore we can start to make good inroads into it. On steel production, there are 2 types of steel. Effectively, the basic oxygen furnace has got 80% more embodied carbon in it than the electric arc furnace steel. So if we can actually target higher strength steel to be more effective, and we can end up designing, rather than for load, but more for deflection, vibration, and now carbon, we can actually get a much lower carbon structure. So effectively, what we're trying to do as a business, we've identified that in a structure, there's around, in the structural floor plate, there's around 200 kgs of CO2 per square metre. We're targeting 10% year on year, so we're hoping to get that down to about 140 by 2026. We've also developed, with funding from Innovate UK, with cement-free and oil precasters amongst the partners, as well as hair and AKT2, a method of doing off-site cassettes, which is what you see in the foreground there. And what we've tried to do here is get low cement carbon, which can actually achieve the same as an ordinary concrete structure. So if we move to the next slide, you can see a mock-up here of what we've put together. It's a typical 9 by 9 metre office grid. It uses our low carbon cassettes. We've reduced the carbon on this from 200 down to just over 50. So already we're taking 75% of the carbon out of the superstructure plates and moving to a different low carbon situation. So the idea behind all of this is, how do we actually achieve this with a view to taking the carbon down into a very low building, and convincing the clients we're doing the right sort of thing. So just the one last slide from me is how we take this change from being an idea right the way through to commercially available. And so effectively, where we are with the Innovate UK project, we're doing the factory tests and the proof of concept. The next steps will be whole project tests. And this is the area that Yewande mentioned earlier about how you can actually lose a bit of margin on this, because our margin's really low. But once we've dealt with all this, we can then move on and roll it out to the business. So it's a really exciting time, as Yewande mentioned, and I'll hand you back to her for the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was super. Thank you very much, and thank you for the pictures as well, because they really bring things into perspective as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Stuart. Stuart, have we got you? Oh, brilliant, fantastic. Hello there. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. So Stuart is the managing director. Stuart Norman is the managing director of Keltbray Piling. He has successfully grown the business to become a leader in the piling and ground engineering field in the UK, winning numerous industry awards along the way. Keltbray are members of the FPS, and their specialism is in managing and undertaking complex piling and retaining wall projects across various construction sectors. Thank you very much, Stuart. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Normally on a Zoom call, we do a full round of introductions, but I'll just do myself because we've probably not got time. So yeah, my name is Stuart Norman, Managing Director for Keltbray Piling. I'm a chartered engineer and a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I'm delighted to be talking to you today about the Hyperpile. Next slide, please. So the Hyperpile is an amalgamation of individual innovations which, when combined, offer unprecedented savings in embodied and emitted carbon, an improvement in quality, an improvement in safety, and provides the innovation to reduce the material volume and waste, as well as speeding the overall construction programme. It's worth noting that not all elements have to be adopted, and that a number of these innovations can be delivered in isolation. The product is subject to 5 patents pending, and we also exclusively license the Hyperpile IP from City University of London. So what does the Hyperpile stand for? Well, it's on the screen there for you, and I'll break these down individually for slides as we go through. The H is for hollow, primarily to reduce material use and embodied carbon. The I is for an impression enhancement, specially designed tool which enhances the design performance of cast in situ board piles in certain ground conditions. The P is for a precast hollow board pile, which embraces DFMA, and as Peter has already said, moving from construction to production. The E element is for energy storage and generation, and this has primarily been designed to reinvigorate the thermal energy market in the UK. And R is for reusable, so for the first time, for heavily loaded deep board foundations, for us to move from a linear economy to a fully circular economy through the ability to offer a 2-time warranty for the utilisation of these piles for future generations. All of these elements incorporate smart technology and sensors in order to monitor and give live feedback on the structural performance during occupation. Next slide, please. So the hollow and the reusable elements tend to go hand in hand, but primarily the hollow pile can either be a cast in situ or a precast foundation, which we'll come to shortly. For the cast in situ version there, you can see in the middle picture, we use a very thin steel liner to form the void, with a 200mm concrete annulus formed around the outside. Why do we do this? Well, obviously to save material volume and carbon, but it's really to better match the geotechnical and the structural performance of the piles that we install. Typically, piles have nowhere near the structural stress that they're designed for because of the limitations due to the geotechnical performance. So this provides us with between a 30 and a 70% concrete saving by volume, depending on the diameter that we're comparing it against. Larger diameters do give greater savings. Where we're moving with this is that we're aiming to adopt large diameter monopiles, so try to move away from multiple pile caps so that we can eliminate the pile cap construction and also the embodied carbon associated with the pile cap as well. The void itself permits inspection during operation so that we can warrant and reuse the pile for the next occupants. More often than not, we are now moving on to our second and third generation of sites, particularly in heavily built up areas such as the main cities in the UK. And we're struggling to squeeze piles into the new locations, particularly when we're constrained by what we can and what we can't reuse due to the restrictions of warranties that are put upon us. The hollow pile also has an added benefit in that we're better able again to match the stiffness of the pile to the stiffness of the ground. What does that mean? That means that we're better able to further improve the shaft friction performance of this hollow pile element. Next slide, please. So the impression pile element. Again, if you take yourselves back to your childhoods, playing around with a bit of clay, a lump of clay in a clay pot, you put your thumb in the clay pot and you just place the clay and you form a nice little impression. Effectively, that's what we're doing here in those bottom right hand photos. We are remodeling the clay in order to give enhanced shaft friction. How do we do that? Well, we're effectively moving the interface away from a concrete to soil interface to a soil to soil interface. And by doing that, we enhance shaft friction by between 30 and 40%. What does that mean for the layman? It means that wherever we design a 750mm diameter pile, it's more often performing as a 930mm diameter pile, but without the material and the embodied carbon that goes with that. So we're able to reduce the material volume by around about 15%. And sometimes, depending on the ground conditions, we're also thereafter able to avoid going into water-bearing strata, which adds significant time and cost. Next slide, please. So the precast pile, like I say, embraces DFMA and deep foundations. There's a little snippet there of the design of the element. Overall, to improve construction quality. And the main element for this is that rather than breaking piles down to their final cutoff level, we are intending on building them up to the final cutoff level. So a bit like a Lego block, really. What does this do? It certainly improves health and safety because we are able to eliminate halves from the pile trimming works. The connection to the ground is formed through a grouting of the annulus, the thin annulus, between the precast element and the ground itself. Next slide, please. So the energy pile, basically we're able to incorporate significantly higher thermal efficiencies because concrete is a poor conductor of heat, whereas water is a much better conductor of heat. So we fill the void with water and we're better able to provide much greater enhanced thermal performance. We also solve a particular problem in that the majority of ground source heat loops are damaged during pile breakdown. So we completely avoid this through separating the piling construction activity from the thermal construction activity itself, thereby also improving overall productivity. Next slide, please. So I won't labour this point too much, but we've done an analysis here. So are net zero deep pile foundations realistic? If we allow for 100% is what we do day to day. We've analysed a 900mm diameter pile in green and a 2.4 metre diameter pile in red. And if we just replace a solid pile with either SEM-free concrete or earth-friendly concrete, we're able to offer a 45% saving. As we introduce each element of the hyperpile we eventually get to either an 85% saving in embodied carbon or a 94% saving in embodied carbon. Once we add in the operational savings associated with the use of the pile for thermal energy, which offers a coefficient of performance of 500%, it could conceivably be given that we are actually producing a carbon negative foundation, a first for the UK. And last slide, please. So there's a summary of the benefits there. I'm running a little bit over time, so I won't run through those in any detail, but there are a number of indirect benefits associated as well as the direct benefits that I've spoken about today, and I'd be pleased to field some questions much later on down the line. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was really fascinating. And actually, we've been getting a number of questions come through. Can I just ask our audience to please ensure their questions are going to the Q&A boxes against the chat function, just so we can make sure that we capture and answer as many of your questions as possible. Thank you again, Stuart, for that. It's a pleasure to introduce Ian Naylor. Ian, have we got you on?
Hello. Yep, here I am.
Oh, yes. Fantastic. Brilliant. Nice to see you. Ian is a chartered architect. He's also the lead of design research at DFE. He specializes in school building design and has worked on academies, free schools, PSBP, and the new school rebuilding program. He's currently the lead of the design research units in DFE, developing and ensuring standards of construction are set and met. And his team has been meeting the challenge of climate change with a wide range of projects, including GenZero. Ian, thank you very much for joining us and looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Thank you. That's great. Good morning, everyone. Okay, this is around GenZero. Next slide, if you would, please. Yeah, so what's GenZero then? So it's a project, it's a major research project that DFE has been undertaking capital, and it's been doing that with Innovate UK, the Construction Innovation Hub. So what we were looking to do, we were looking to create a new generation prototype for secondary schools. That's where we started off, particularly focused around off-site construction and looking at net zero targets. I think what we created is a new platform for buildings, particularly focused on making those in a factory setting. And we set out at the start with an active choice to work in timber. Now, what was really interesting is when you see some of the results later on, it was absolutely the right choice to do when we look at the carbon. We were looking at capability across government, so we wanted a sort of flexible platform system, and we wanted to fit that with a sort of standardized approach. And we set out at the start, and I've been enormously surprised about this digital working, and it's been an absolute triumph across all sorts of different digital platforms, using different systems and drawing those together in a really federated way. Next slide, please. No, that's great. So, and the next one, please. So what have we done? We're looking at a secondary school. This is one of two models that we've created. If we just pause for a moment, you can see that we split the school into three parts. We split it into three parts around two elements. One is around the sort of type of spaces that go into each one. Halls being very large spaces, and the, pardon me, teaching room being classic cellular spaces. The commons is the sort of pastoral support, dining rooms and IT spaces and libraries in the middle. But the other thing is that these spaces was orientated around the way that we make different parts of the buildings. Next slide, please. The great advantage of the buildings, we designed a building without corners, which sounds rather odd. But in other words, we don't bend buildings around limbs. We keep constant extruded forms, which are very, very easy to manufacture. Next slide, please. And we've got lots of different elements of why this is so good, but one of the things this does is it allows crossflow ventilation, which is captured in our new specification for schools S21, and it's critical to the way that we heat scavenge and energy scavenge later on in the design. Next slide, please. Right, the standardization piece. Next one, please. what we've done is we've split the building. You can see there green halls, orange are cellular teaching spaces, and the grey is the support spaces. Next one, please. And the next, this is a little click sequence of slides. You can see we've set the building up around a standard grid. We're just going to have a look at this little grey bit. It's around a 3.6 grid. If you just slow a little minute, we'll just pause for a minute, just so people understand. It's 3.6 metre grid, which is common to both the panelised system. It's a classic old 3.6 and 7.2 classical grid for steelwork, but it's at core as well. It fits around volumetric, and this building concentrates on both a combined panelised and volumetric solution. Panelised for the simple spaces and volumetric for the spaces that we want to fit out very much on site. There's an ancillary grid for small rooms. Next slide, please. And circulation at 2.4 in line with the new S21. We've allowed ourselves in that ancillary grid to form voids for cross-vent, 55 for a standard classroom, 69 for say an IT room, 83 for a laboratory, 97, and 111 for those big specialist spaces. And that ancillary grid working really hard for support spaces, offices, and so on, and to provide that ventilation through the building. Let's keep going. And there you can see it blocked out as a standard block and blocked out as a DT suite as well. And let's just watch the way this builds up. Next slide, please. And just pause there. What we're really proud about there, you can just see the concrete, the composite concrete and timber panels coming in for the floors. This is a CLT fabricated external panel structurally. Next one, please. And you can see that the cross walls, because we've used line loaded system, can fit anywhere onto that 1.8 grid. And that's how we get a classroom or a laboratory. Next one, please. And we've created a service spine, really unique. We're shifted away from organising our structures into a sort of volumetrically almost pre-constructed element for services in that vertical element. And then even the lighting fits on the grid, so we can dissect these spaces very simply. Next one, please. So that just gives you a sense of yellow being the panelised elements of the building, red being volumetric plant rooms, volumetric kitchens, volumetric toilets, and staircases of pre-assembled elements. Next slide, please. And this slide, just a structural system, you'll see red being volumetric, brown being the panelised, sitting on piles. These were real sites with real buildings. If you keep going, you can see the way that the building stacks up, really very simply using composite floor panels and timber, CLT, and glue laminated structure. This will just show you there, so the structure is largely timber. You can see the volumetric panels, which will come in red, volumetric units coming in red. So here we are, we'll just disassemble this and just watch the way it goes in. So there are those composite floor panels we're really proud of. There's a volumetric unit coming in and being clad. There's the service spine coming in, pre-assembled and fitted out. The external wall coming in as a structural system with its windows, and then the capping pieces going on afterwards. The walls going in with their dado and their frieze already on it, roof going in, finished on site. You'll see the PV panels dropping in. Keep going. And then the furniture all designed in a moment. You'll see this, the furniture going into the building. We've moved away from fixed furniture to loose furniture just about everywhere in the building. And you'll see, there we are. We set the furniture up as a series of families. It's virtually largely on wheels, except for the tables. And even the sink units are plugged in. They're not scribed and fitted to the building. And we've managed to get chairs, a real achievement, down to 5 only chairs in the building. Great success. Next slide, please. Low carbon. This is one of the core elements. We just pause a little minute on this. We've modelled the building in a lot of ways. This is looking across the whole life of the building, A to C, using the RIBA methods of building. And you can see that we comfortably exceed the RIBA A to C 2020 on the top bar, and we're just nudging the RIBA 2030 really hard target. If we allow the sequestered carbon to come into place, you can see that on the green arrow. You can see that allowing for the timber, in other words, element of the building, you can see that we substantially exceed the RIBA A to C target, even for 2030 on the bottom grey bar. So a really strong position from embodied carbon. Next slide, please. Here we are on operational carbon, and you can see the various targets. You can see where we achieve GenZero on our Crawley site in blue, and you can see the output of our PVs across an annualized period, and you can see that we're comfortably net zero on operational carbon. Thank you. Next slide, please. And I said I'd talk very briefly about what a great building. You can see that one of the we struck this really early on, CLT manufactured halls block, all uniform spaces. We've made them all there, spanned with glue laminated, but it's without a frame. It's a box structure in its own right. Next slide, please. And you can just see what it looks like when it's finished. The timber is celebrated on the inside of the building. It's clad on the outside. The gap between the glue lams at the top provide us with our ventilation. It's so simple. And the only thing that we had to do is to unify the activity studio at the far end, so they were all common extruded spaces. Next slide, please. And we've got a prototype being made up in Scotland using UK sourced timber. We're even making our glue laminated sections ourselves, experimentally using that timber. It's a different type of timber. It's a little bit moister. And so far it's working brilliantly. So we're very proud. There's a little prototype at the bottom, what we're modeling up using those composite floor panels. Next slide, please. And if you, a little couple of clicks just to bring up the annotation on this. There's a classroom, polished concrete floors in there. You can see all the furniture is loose. You can see the exposed CLT on the walls, which is really quite complicated to achieve, but great. And the whole life carbon and the whole life modeling around there is fantastic. And the grey is the acoustic freeze. We've got rid of breathing buildings units. We've got a light shelf to manage the wall, cool air coming into the room, and it's cross ventilation. Next slide, please. And just little tiny, this is a whole site approach. The landscape is working so hard for us. Probably a little bit of adiabatic cooling going on there. And we've brought the SUDs, the sustainable herbal drainage, to the surface. We're using that as rain gardens, as you can see, and we're pushing the hard surfaces there to avoid the heat island effect away from the building. Next slide, please. Outdoor classrooms. And we've got PV array on most of the building, including on the outdoor classrooms and on the bin stores, which I think is another great achievement. Outdoor classrooms, even those constructed in timber. This is about a whole life, embracing a whole life position. Next slide, please. And finally, the commons. We've had very little time to talk about the welfare benefit of the pupils, but it's really about, in a biophilic way, engaging the pupils with what's going on outside to join that whole story up. This is that central commons block, and the image at the bottom speaks for itself about the dining room looking out at the landscape. And I think this is bringing us to an end. The final slide, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Truly fascinating stuff. And I'm sure if we had more time, we'd be delving into the details of that. Have we got Ron on? Yeah. Great, fantastic. Hello, Ron. Ron, I'm going to do a very quick intro because we're running a little bit behind, but Ron is the CEO of Active Buildings Centre and has 35 years experience in the construction industry, satisfying lots of different industries right across from defense to investment, nuclear and scientific. Thank you so much, Ron, for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Ron Cowney, Chief Executive of the Active Building Centre, and a little message to everybody who's online listening. This is the best job I've ever had in my life. So anybody who's thinking about joining the construction world, it's very, very enjoyable and you'll have a great career. So I'd encourage it. Next slide, please. Okay, so the one question that I'm always asked is, what is an active building? What's the definition of an active building? Well, an active building supports the energy networks by intelligently integrating renewable energy technologies for heat, power and transport. And there's 4 key elements to an active building. First of all, is fabric. The fabric design is a key element of an active building. We have the energy efficient system of how we integrate the elements of capturing PV through solar, through heat pumps, and how we capture the energy. We've also got the on-site renewable energy generation capabilities, whether it's wind, solar, hydrogen, and how we store that energy. We also integrate electric vehicles, and that is part of the energy systems for an active building, and ultimately integrating homes with communities and the national grid. Next slide. So a home is a power station, ultimately. And what is net carbon zero? And net carbon zero for me is when we can provide the heat and energy that satisfies the occupancy demands whilst being disconnected from the mains electricity and gas. That's ultimately what operational net carbon zero is when we can disconnect the home from the mains, electric and gas. However, the main problem is, how do we get our building through the winter months? There's an awful lot of energy available in the summer months to generate power and to store that. And how do we store that energy and release it through winter? So that's the key. One of the key strategies of the Active Building Centre is to demonstrate how we can balance the heat and energy load interseasonal. We call this interseasonal heat and energy balance. Next slides. Okay, so for me, it's the compelling part of an active building is, do you put food on somebody's table, or do you put energy in the meter? And net carbon zero and challenge identifies the key thing is there's a lot of fuel poverty out there, and people can't afford to eat or run the home as well. So having buildings that can generate an income for the occupancy is a great thing. So the Active Building Centre, what are we? We are a centre of excellence whose mission is to promote the improved understanding and increased commercialisation of low carbon construction and renewable technologies for energy capture, storage, integration and distribution within and between buildings through adapting, adopting, improving and developing cutting edge technologies which simply, the word simply is very important to me, connect, control and integrate building energy solutions within intelligent network systems. So ABC's aim is to revolutionize the way in which buildings are powered and heated to accelerate the UK's drive towards net carbon zero. Next slide. So the 3 C's, I call it, we capture and store energy, we connect all the elements together and control it, and we configure it. Next slide, please. Part of an active building is to connect all the elements together, and we look at the energy systems, connect them together with the occupancy, a product selector, and create a digital twin of the building and the community so we can learn from how the building works with the occupancy in the building fabric to optimize the energy flows. Next slide. And finally, we are producing a configurator, giving this information to everybody who wishes to know how to have a journey to net carbon zero in a building or community through actual worked examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ron, for that. Really useful. I'm looking at that configurator and thinking that would be extremely instrumental in our industry.
Very, very important. It's the key. It's
very, very important. Yes. It's a real pleasure to introduce Ian Hutchcroft. I can see him. Oh, fantastic. He's on my screen now. Brilliant. Ian is part of the Energiesprong team adapting the Dutch developed approach for the UK market, working closely with teams all over the world. And the approach, I'm sure we'll hear about it, but it's really an approach to deliver zero carbon retrofit and new build homes. Thank you very much, Ian, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Energiesprong, it means energy leap in Dutch. And it's the name that's been given to the Dutch government strategy for delivering zero carbon homes, particularly retrofits, but also it works for new build. It's a strategy for delivering zero carbon retrofit of existing housing stocks at scale quickly. Next slide, please. So our role in Energiesprong UK is to take that successful Dutch experience and translate it into the UK market, which we've done, demonstrate that it works, which we've done, and scale up a market and an industry to deliver this, which we are in the course of doing. Next click, please. And we're 100% publicly funded. We're not delivering retrofit, we're a catalyst organisation, market development organisation, and we are 100% publicly funded by EU, UK and UK local government sources. So let's just recap. We've got a big job on here. We have 27 million homes, and they all have to be zero carbon within the next decade or two. And the retrofit that we've done to date isn't the way that we're going to achieve that goal in the future. There are a number of things that are missing. We don't have a business model for doing home retrofit by and large. We don't have a way of financing retrofit. The cost is too high at the moment to get to zero carbon. The demand, well, who really wants this done to their homes? Scale is a real issue. Being able to deliver thousands and thousands of retrofit on a daily basis across the UK is a challenge currently. And there is a performance gap between the design and modelled approach and what it actually performs in the real world. So the Energiesprong approach recognises that we need a whole house approach, as many people do. We need a whole house approach to achieve zero carbon, but we also need a whole system strategy to get this done. So the Energiesprong strategy provides a business model to finance the cost of the works from savings. It reduces cost through industrialisation and aggregating demand and scaling up volume through economies of scale and industrialisation. It produces homes that are a joy to live in, that look great on a really simple offer to homeowners. So it answers the demand issue. By using industrialisation and aggregating that demand, this is deliverable at scale, and it answers the performance gap by requiring verified monitoring of actual performance every day, every year, and to have that performance guaranteed by the solution provider that has delivered the work. Next slide, please. So a key part of this, as a number of the other speakers have mentioned on, is modern methods of construction, industrialising the approach, not just to construction, but specifically to retrofit here, and doing as much of the work in factories as possible, producing components that can be put together on site in an efficient way as a kit of parts. Next one, please. And the second important element of the Energiesprong strategy is the business case that pays for it. So we're using social housing as the launching market. It's big enough to bring scale on which an industry can evolve around supplying. So in the traditional social housing context, the resident pays the landlord their rent, and they pay their utility company their energy bill. In the Energiesprong world, they are still paying rent, but they're paying an additional charge, a proportion of what was their energy bill, but is now an energy bill saving. A proportion of that is paid to their landlord as a comfort plan charge. The resident receives guaranteed comfort for a guaranteed low total price, less than they were paying before. There's still a residual electricity bill, electric only, there's no gas, and that goes to the utility. Resident can still switch like they can before, but that additional income is used by the landlord together with the savings of their planned maintenance programme to finance a business model that pays for the capital cost over the long term. Next slide, please. Quick video of what it can look like if you could run this. Hope this will work for you. It could be a bit jerky, but this is a Dutch company back in 2018 doing zero carbon retrofit in one day on site. They've 3D laser measured the property before the one day. In this case, they're attached in brackets to the front. It's a nice strong wall. They're going to hang these factory made panels off it. That was an energy module flying in. Quick, simple job to connect the heat pump and the other bits and pieces into existing plumbing and electrics. There's ventilation equipment in there as well. Their factory made panels have triple glazed windows and doors already fitted. Only internal works is a quick new reveal system around the windows. The roof going on, all they've done is taken the slates off to reduce the load. Lightweight roof going in with the rails already fitted for the PV. Extra accommodation being provided in this property. In this case, it's capable of being a ground floor wet room, the disability living proof the property. An example of how MMC can make it possible to increase the volume of property, put stories on the top, put extensions out the back. And you come home from work at the end of the day and your house has been transformed. It looks better than a new build home. It's guaranteed to be warm and comfortable every day for a guaranteed low, affordable total energy cost. And you extrapolate that out to the whole terrace and the whole neighbourhood, and what you've got is regenerated communities paid for by energy and maintenance bill savings that are delivered by the retrofit. So that's what Energiesprong can look like. If we go to the next slide, let's just whiz through a few of these. So that's the same archetype, same company rolled out. That's a semi with the energy module, not quite so quick, in the porch. These are, next one, please. These are street scale, estate scale properties scaled up that have been retrofitted, lots of different looks and feel. Next one, please. Non-trad property with accommodation added on the top and underneath here, as well as net zero retrofit. Next one, please. The residents chose the colours here, lots of positive ways to engage the residents. Next one, please. Works for flats. Next one, please. Works for high rise, bit more difficult to get to net zero, but it can be done affordably, and grid friendly electrification. Next one. And it works for new build too. Next one, please. What we're aiming for is being able to deliver at scale. So an industry that can go street by street by street without decanting anybody, quick installs leading to net zero. Next one, please. First project in the UK in Nottingham, delivered by Melius Homes for Nottingham City Homes. Initially 10, now over 350 homes in contract and being delivered. Next one, please. Second project was in Malden in Essex for Moat Housing Association, delivered by NG. 5 homes completed there back in 2019. Next slide, please. Third UK project was in Devon. 3 social landlords coming together, jointly procuring MySpace, part of the Midas group, to deliver initially 16 homes. And there is a further contract being signed shortly for an extension, an additional number of homes there. Next slide, please. So very quick summary of the 3 key elements of the Energiesprong approach. First of all, the client asks the market for a different product. You procure a design, build and long-term guarantee solution in one integrated contract against a high-level performance-based specification of net zero energy, which means the property needs to consume as much electricity in the year as it actually produces. Sometimes it imports, sometimes it exports, but that drives the business model. There's a bundle of comfort of plug power, hot water and temperature for a guaranteed low energy cost for the resident, guaranteed low maintenance cost long-term for the building owner. So what you get is an assured quality product, long-term performance guaranteed, no decanting of anybody. It's affordable because it's financed from those guaranteed savings, and it's desirable too because it looks good and feels good to the resident. Next one, please. Second key step is that this is an easy to understand product. Guaranteed comfort every day for a fixed weekly or monthly cost. Next slide, please. And the third really important step is you can't build an industrialized sector of the economy off doing pilot projects. We have to build a long-term volume market in a really clear, guaranteed way for the supply chain to unlock investment in industrialization and innovation. So this is what we do as Energiesprong UK. We work with landlords to aggregate demand and bring that demand into the market. We work with supply chain companies to help them understand what they need to do to win contracts and to make it easier for them to invest in innovation. And we also work with the government and policymakers to make the early market conditions right for landlords bringing volume in and for the supply chain too. Next one, please. And the final thing that we've just launched, you might have seen it in the press last week, the Mayor of London announced the launch of the Retrofit Accelerator Homes Innovation Partnership. So this is a public procurement mechanism to allow social landlords to aggregate their demand, and we have over 2,500 homes committed to contract through this mechanism, for a panel of procured solution providers to go through a stage process of initially designing solutions for individual archetypes, prototyping them. If cost reduction and performance has been met, go to the next bigger stage. If further cost reduction and performance is met, go to the next stage. Further cost reduction and performance met, you're at the economic price point where the savings cover the cost of the works then, and you automatically go onto a framework that anybody can buy the solution from. So that's what we're working through over the next couple of years here in the UK. Next one, please. And that's it from me. And do drop me a line if you're interested in this and want to get involved.
Thank you very much, Ian. Talk about truly transformational. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And very quickly, we're going to go on to Vincent Clancy. Okay, I can see him. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Very welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Vincent. I'm going to very quickly introduce you. Vincent is the chairman and CEO of Turner & Townsend and has set the strategic direction of the firm since 2008. Vincent, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'm actually, whilst my day job is Chief Exec of Turner & Townsend, I'm here today in my capacity as a member of the Construction Leadership Council, and to introduce to those of you who already haven't seen it, the Construct Zero initiative, which is a change management initiative for how we're going to get the construction industry to that carbon zero position. If we just go on to the next slide, I'll briefly introduce you to those who don't know us, the Construction Leadership Council. Its mission is really to provide the transformation of the construction industry itself. It's a joint initiative between the government and industry organisations. It's been set up for a number of years now, and back in, I think just around about 2018 or 2017, we got the first ever construction sector deal from the government, which put us on par with pharmaceuticals and technology and aerospace. And that was all about setting some really challenging targets for how we might transform the industry. You'll see those targets there. I suppose the big one, which is very topical today, is the 50% reduction in carbon emissions. And so one of the actual targets we set with government was that we were going to see if we could get that 50% reduction in carbon emissions across the industry. And of course, we're now working with government to see how we can get the industry to net zero in accordance with that 2030 or 2050 programme. In terms of the way the CLC is structured, just for those of you who don't know it, there's an executive. It's co-chaired by Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who's the construction minister within Bays, and also Andy Mitchell, who is the CEO of Tideway. There's 12 work streams which the CLC work on a continued basis. They cover segments of industry such as infrastructure, our house building, but other initiatives such as skills, building, safety, and zero carbon. So there's a big agenda. And also the third constituent part of the CLC is we've got a group of senior advisors who provide challenge to the work going on within the CLC and make sure that we're hitting the big industry issues, of which carbon is absolutely front and center. Moving on to the next slide. In terms of Construction Zero, the aims, well, Construction Zero role is not to develop new solutions, roadmaps, or new pathways. I mean, we've seen this morning that there's already an amazing amount of work going on across industry to move towards that net zero position. But we do believe that the CLC has a critical role in bringing people together to consolidate collective actions for the sector. So the real goal of Construction Zero is to act as a convener for the industry, to bring the industry collectively together forward, to remove roadblocks, by working with government to see where we need to, if you like, oil the wheels so that we can get rid of roadblocks so that it's going to happen quicker, and also to make it accessible to all in the industry. And obviously we've seen some amazing examples of progress today, but we actually need to get the whole industry to be able to participate, and therefore we want to act as that convening force. So we're hoping to share solutions and set transparent goals, and therefore, as I say, it's very much about a change management program to take all the good work and make sure it's embedded and that we get the whole industry to adopt. Moving on to the next slide. You know, we've set, as part of the launch of Construction Zero, there's been 9 priorities set, and they go across 3 key areas: transport, buildings, and construction activity. In terms of transport, the big area there is to shift to zero emission vehicles and on-site plant. Secondly, we've heard a lot about it today, is maximising the use of modern methods of construction. Thirdly, linking to one actually is champion the development of enough connectivity and enough access to low carbon electricity to enable one to take place. So 3 big areas around transport. In terms of buildings themselves, we're looking at that retrofit. So it's great to hear the last presentation, but we're working with government to see how do we create the conditions which will allow the volume and the retrofit program to occur. Also linked to that is we're looking at how we scale up industry capability to deliver low carbon heat solutions in buildings. We know there's a massive volume issue around this, and we've got to actually provide the capacity. And finally, we're looking at how we enhance the energy performance of existing buildings and the operational efficiency of existing buildings within that buildings cycle. And from a construction activity point of view, one of the big things we're looking at is how do we implement a carbon measurement system which will support construction projects in making quantifiable decisions to remove carbon. Linked to my role on the CLC, one of my roles in the CLC is to champion the exports agenda, and we want the UK construction industry to become the world leaders in designing out carbon. And this links to government's wider objectives, but we want to develop capability in our designers and construction professionals to design in line with the circular economy. In doing so, this is a massive opportunity for business to get access to other markets, and we're really looking forward to that. And finally, and we've heard about it again today, we want the CLC to help support the development of innovation in carbon materials, as well as advancing carbon solutions for manufacturing, production processes, and distribution. So these are the 9 key priorities that have been set for the launch of Construction Zero. Moving on to the next slide, we've got some key deliverables which we're going to hope to achieve by the end of June. The first under performance measurement is that we're going to have a draft performance framework of milestones, metrics, and targets, and the processes by which the industries and businesses will report. So a lot of great work going on, but it's very hard to see how much progress we're making. So the idea is we build a framework which allows us to see where we are on that path, on that transition to net zero. Secondly, there's a big push linked to COP26 to get businesses to sign up to the Race to Zero accreditation. Turner & Townsend, as an example, we've already signed. It's the government's chosen partner. And what we want to do is get as many construction businesses and design businesses and industry businesses to sign up to the Race to Zero and to get that accreditation, because that gives everyone a route map for how they're going to move their businesses forward. So a big campaign will be going on over the latter part of this month in order to encourage businesses to do that. Finally, in terms of 2 things, signposting and support, we're building a web presence which will direct businesses to the relevant support in industry, particularly for SMEs, really, really important. This is a really challenge. I know in my business, it's taken us a really long time, 2-3 years to get our head around how we're going to get to net zero. So for smaller businesses, we really want to provide resources to allow them to get the support they need to make the steps they need. We've also got a series of events hosted by trade associations and the CLC aimed at upskilling the industry and raising the debate around this subject. And finally there, we've got champion stories. So one of the things we've done as part of the Construction Zero launch is a number of business champions have been created, and more are being created. And those business champions are going into the industry to talk about what we can achieve together if we get this right. Finally, under communications and engagement, we've got COP26 event plans. We put a bid in to have a presence at COP26. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of bids to get a presence there. We're through to the final round. One of the things we're doing as part of that COP26 event plan, in partnership with ITM, we're producing a film around construction. And that film is absolutely going to demonstrate the opportunity we've got as an industry to lead the way in the world in terms of transforming our energy. Now, in the past, construction's been part of the problem. This is all about how we make construction part of the solution, and an amazing opportunity for us and as an industry to do that. And finally, working with the Green Construction Board, we've got a forward programme of government policy announcements where we're influencing government policy to really support the industry changing and getting us to Construct Zero. So I whizzed through all of that because I was told I needed to try and catch up some time. But just to conclude by saying, really excited, a massive opportunity for the industry. The CLC isn't going to do it, but what it will do is act as a convener and work with government to remove roadblocks, but also work to help industry get access to what it needs so that we can all go on this journey.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Vincent. And actually, I'm going to just go straight into the questions now because we've received quite a number of questions. And any questions that we don't answer today, I'm being assured that responses will go out to all of our attendees in due course. So please be very patient with us. Vincent, can I really quickly ask, and I think this is reflected in some of the questions that have come through. What is our thinking around skills and skills shortage potentially, and what needs to happen in terms of getting us to a place that we need to be in terms of, you know, ensuring that we have the right skills?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's obviously a massive issue, and a lot of the work we're doing at the CLC, we've got a skills work stream, which I referenced, and absolutely we're working with government around a green skills agenda. So how do we produce the skills that are fit for the future? And you know, you've heard today about so much shifting in terms of, you know, we haven't talked about digital much actually, but there's a huge digital shift around how we're going to use digital in the future to enable modern methods of construction, itself. We've got the retrofit program, which is an amazing opportunity to generate jobs, and very much part of the government's 10-point plan around transitioning to green is skills. So absolutely the heart of the Construct Zero program and at the heart of the government's view on this is that we've got to absolutely not only create the solution, but create the skills that will enable us to deliver that. And at the heart of that is better jobs as well. And there's a real opportunity here to give access to the industry to a whole new layer of participation, but also to create better jobs and better paid jobs and more sustainable jobs, and create an industry that's been very short term and try and give it a much longer term focus.
Yes, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. I've got a question here for Ron and Ian Hutchcroft. Sarah is asking, both active building and Energiesprong sound like amazing net zero projects that local communities can actively advocate for within their local authorities. Are there any ways for local communities to get involved in raising awareness and engagement? Ian, if we start with you.
Yeah, I think certainly, I think there's a message here that a zero carbon home is a better home to live in. And, you know, I don't think current retrofit approaches really get into that zeitgeisty thing of home makeover and, you know, nice places, healthy homes and things like that. So there's a good message to get out there. And I think word of mouth and community engagement and seeing homes in your locality that are great homes to live in and are affordable to live in too. Oh, and they happen to be net zero too. And that's good for the planet and good for all of us. Those are good messages. And I think engagement with the community to get those messages out is a good thing to do in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. Ron, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I'd agree with Ian wholeheartedly there. Is what we're doing with our demonstration sites is we have modular homes built from MMC, and they're designed for occupancy. They're happy, healthy homes. And we encourage the local community to come in and see how these homes are lived in, how they're used, and how they're all connected. So it doesn't exist until you touch it. So our demonstration site is a living lab where clients and customers and suppliers can come in and gather data and understand what's going on. Because the key thing from our demonstration sites is data, is to show this is how it works and this is the payback. And the ultimate drive for us in net carbon zero is, what is the payback? It's pointless putting energy systems in that has very long payback. It's got to be affordable and with a short payback. So that's our drive. And our demonstration site is designed for people to use and to be part of. And we've got a great community engagement through that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Ian, Naylor, we've got a couple of questions for you. And I'm just going to so I'm just going to choose one. Do we have a sufficient UK timber source to scale up the school buildings that you are developing, or the model for the school buildings that we're...
And presumably we're talking about timber here. The answer is we just don't know at the moment. We don't. So the building system that we've got, I've got three main components: cross-laminated timber, glue lam, and our composite floor panels. And a lot of those products just aren't made in the UK at the moment. But we've got some really interesting conversations going on with our Scottish supply chain, and particularly around that prototype that we're making, to see what we can do, because timber is different in Scotland than it is in Northern Europe. And we've got to make some changes to be able to use Scottish timber. So the straightforward answer is, first of all, we've got to see if we can make the products in the UK. That's what we're doing now. This is R&D. And then the next thing is we need to have a chat with some of our major manufacturers in the UK to see if they'll then would be willing to invest in it. But this is a long-term conversation, not a short-term one. So the 2 to 4 years, I guess, is that sort of around that conversation. But we've designed the building around a grid so that we can start on other elements with some of our really confident supply chain about doing things slightly differently. So 2 to 4 years of extra conversation, I think, is where we're going with that. 2025 would be a great outcome.
Brilliant.
So the answer, I'm not sure, but we're talking about it.
Yes. And what an opportunity as well to, I guess, influence the direction that the supply chain evolves into, in a way.
Sure. I mean, it's a sort of, we've got to move this very gently together. We need some support from our contractors, from our supply chain, and they also need to do some investment. But at the same time, we need to talk to give them some sort of confidence about what we're doing. So we need to do some extra R&D as well. So it's really exciting, but it's really promising for sort of UK suppliers and manufacturers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Stuart, I've got a question for you. Right. So it's lots of questions. Right. So the hyper approach is particularly innovative. But I wonder how it translates to the lower scale dwelling construction.
Yep, good question. Clearly, I mean, the hyper doesn't have to be just a pile. It can be an energy storage and generational element just on its own. So for lower scale dwellings, particularly when we're talking to what Ron was considering in terms of energy sharing across buildings in terms of district heating and cooling, it can be a shared resource in terms of energy storage and generation for multiple low-rise dwellings. It doesn't have to support the building. I am aware in Germany they do and often do one huge piled foundation beneath a big raft, and the advantage for the hyperpile is that huge foundation could also heat and cool the building. So there's many different areas that we could and we are taking the hyperpile, and that's just one example.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Peter, if I can come to you, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, super. And I would very quickly like to hear some of the challenges that you've had along the way, because I can't imagine that, they've been without big challenges, and actually hearing some of the challenges would, I think, be quite inspirational to some people who, and our audience, who are thinking about really, stepping out of the box and doing some truly innovative work.
I think the biggest challenge, and somebody asked the question in the chat, is it cost or attitude? And it's all about attitude. And the biggest challenge we've had, I've been on this journey for about 6 to 7 years with Mace, looking at this offsite manufacturing, and no one wanted to be first. So many people asked us about, what were the impacts on their warranties and their insurances and the rest of it. That's why we're quite firm about saying it's a method, not a system. Basically, you're getting concrete, you're getting steel, you're getting established products, but you put together in a different way. And just getting across the line of having that first product is changing the attitude, changing the mindset of the clients and the subcontractors and everyone else who's involved with it. What we've found is, having built those first 2 towers, we've got a bit of a hiatus now because we haven't got, the next job wasn't lined up. Everyone wanted to see how we got on with the first job, but we've got 8 towers to build in the next 2 years with a pipeline stacking up behind it. It's attracting the interest. So the whole thing is all about getting the attitude right. We talk about being smarter through innovation and partnership. And it's the partnership is 2 ways. It's with the client team to make sure they understand what they're getting, they understand how it's all going to go together. At the end of the day, it's going to meet their cost plan. And it's also with the supply chain to ensure that they can all work together with us. And actually getting over those challenges, once we get that, and as Ian just mentioned, it could be 2025 before we get there. But it's changing those attitudes, cutting away at it and moving forward.
Great, thank you very much. Right, we've got quite a number of questions coming through, but I'm sure I saw one that I thought we should also possibly address. Okay, it's disappeared now, but it was pretty much around how, a follow on from Peter, your comment, how we work with society, local government, how we work with local councils as well, to be able to influence change. And I wondered if anybody had any tips for that interaction that needs to happen, especially with local council, to be able to help them see what needs to be and take people on that journey as well.
Can I pick that one up?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'll give you a worked example of how the Active Building Centre is working with a couple of clients, and it's to de-risk the decision making of active. And what we found is clients, social housing landlords, don't quite know what decision to make to install their equipment and how it works. So part of the de-risking, we've done the modelling of the building fabric with our building physicists, and we're suggesting an energy system to decarbonise. To de-risk that, we are building an off-site test system so that the client can see the performance of the energy system before it's installed. And that acts as an exemplar. It creates a digital twin, or a first twin for us, but it also creates their ability to train the clients on how the system will work and characterize it before it's installed. And that seems to go quite well with our clients of doing an MMC type of energy system.
Can I just chip in there and just say, I think one of the great things that's happened since 2019 for this sector is that local authorities have declared climate emergencies. Local politicians have said zero carbon by 2030, in many cases, 2040, whatever. And that's driven those councils that own housing stock still, the retained stock social landlords, of which there are many in the cities across the UK, with 10, 20,000 stock, 10% of their housing stock, and they declare climate emergency. Politicians have said, get on with it. And that is beginning to bring those local authorities into the market for deep retrofit. The Retrofit Acceleration Homes Innovation Partnership that I mentioned is the place where we're aggregating that demand together and making it available to the supply chain in bite-sized chunks so that an industry can evolve around that volume. And boy, what a difference it would make if UK government declared that climate emergency and made a really clear target for zero carbon homes over the next decade or so. That would really say to the supply chain, wouldn't it, that this isn't just about social housing, this is about owner-occupied markets as well. This is a market worth investing in, worth scaling up, worth industrializing, worth building factors for, because this market is coming along stream and we want to be part of it.
Brilliant, thank you. We're going to move on to closing statements now. I really wish we had more time. There's just so much to explore in these conversations. And I'm hoping that this is the continuation of really, fantastic conversations to come. Can I ask for a closing statement from all of us, please? Vincent, if I can start with you. Any closing inspirational thoughts to leave us with?
No, well, firstly, thanks for hosting today. It's been brilliant. What I would say, I think this is our, there's been a lot of talk about as an industry what we need to do. I don't think we've got a choice. And I'm seeing that from a customer perspective. We work for the top companies in the world. They're not going to accept anything other than transition to net zero if we're going to be their supply chain. So this is our Betamax moment as an industry. And I'd say to everyone, you're either going to have to change and embrace or you won't survive. And that's brilliant because you very rarely get an opportunity to do something which is really great as an industry, because no one can argue with the goal. And secondly, it's a massive opportunity for industry to become better, become more higher margin, to become longer term. So I think it's a collision of an opportunity for industry and an opportunity to do well, but ignore it at your peril because you won't survive if you don't actually embrace it.
Absolutely. Naylor, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, three really short ones. I think picking up on something you said right at the start about being truly transformational, I think we've got to set our aspirations for being truly transformational, because I think the next point I was going to say is this is going to be a journey, and that journey is very long. And if we don't set those targets quite high now, let's worry about where we're going to get to at the end. So I think let's be truly transparent, truly transformational in our sort of approach right now. And I think the final one is to look at it as whole life as well. You know, we're not going to be able to make those big steps forward if we look at things as just what will happen tomorrow. We've got to look at it across a long-term period. So let's be truly transformational. Let's take a whole life approach rather than an immediate approach.
Excellent, thank you. Stuart, any closing thoughts?
I'll just I'll just reply to a question that's been asked really, and you know, in one word, do the panelists see the biggest challenge facing our net zero aspirations as cost or attitude? Well, I can't give a one-word answer to that, I'm afraid. I'm a bit of a politician, but I would say that cost is an attitude driven by culture. Awareness and education is critical to changing our culture. So aim high or deep in the hyperpile case.
Brilliant, thank you. Peter, any closing thoughts, please?
I just really reiterating what everyone else has said, and Ron mentioned he's been in the industry a long time. This is the most exciting job he's had. It's my 40th year in the industry this year, and we are at the beta max moment, has been said. And I think it's all being driven by three main things from our point of view, and that's the digital transformation is huge. To collect data and use it is really useful. The opportunity to deliver stuff off-site and manufacture and cut out waste is a key driver. And that's where we've been going for a couple of 3 years. And really the low carbon agenda has been ramped up in the last year. And that will really have an impact both in the embodied energy in buildings and then the way that they operated as well. And that's an area that we really need to drive into in the next year or so.
Fantastic, thank you. Ron?
I think my closing statement would be the opportunities for new jobs and new skills and new ways of working is going to be very significant. It's going to be potentially bigger than things that sorry, there we go. I was talking to a blank screen there. Training is the big thing for me. I think the opportunities are significant going forward for us all. And I think the opportunities for every type of skill from apprentice right the way through to graduate level of engineers is significant. And it will change the way the construction is perceived rather than a little bit of a backward thinking industry to a forward thinking innovation-led organization and industry. So
brilliant, thank you very much. And Ian Hutchcroft.
Thank you. I think the supply chain trusting the performance of their own products sufficiently to be able to guarantee their actual long-term performance is one of the significant transformations that we need, because those guarantees of actual zero carbon and actual cost saving, it's the guaranteed cost saving that unlocks the potential to finance the scale and volume of building retrofit that we need in this country really urgently. And why shouldn't an industry be confident enough about the performance of its own products to be able to guarantee its actual performance? And that's even easier if you do most of the work in a factory with good quality control.
Brilliant, thank you so much. It's been a huge pleasure to be part of this very important discussion. And I can't thank you enough for the insight that you've brought. I've learned so much as well in the last hour and a bit. And I have to say thank you very much for the exceptional work that you're doing and the truly inspirational progress that you're bringing to our industry. Thank you to all of our audience. It's been a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm going to hand over to Christine, back to Christine. Thank you for keeping us in line and in check. Thank you very much as well for organizing this. Thank you, Christine.
And thank you, Yewande, for being an amazing chair and bringing forward those questions with such passion. Just to confirm that the slides will be made available to the attendees, and as Yewande said, any questions that we weren't able to get to, we hope to be able to contact you with responses. So don't feel you have typed in vain. But thank you ever so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This is just the start of the conversation. And we really look forward to working with you all in the future again. Thank you.